Hi, this is the start of our adolescence chapters. So, this is chapter 14, and we will cover the physical domain of development. So, to start off, let's talk about what does adolescence represent? Well, typically it's about 11 or 12 to 18 years old. So, we find that there are phases of adolescence as children develop. Early adolescence is those rapid changes, the growth spurt. Middle adolescence is where puberty is nearly complete, and late is where you kind of have that adult appearance and start to go into adulthood. Now, we're going to talk about timing of puberty also. And some children don't meet these ages, right? They might be early bloomers or late bloomers, and then that brings in some other factors. Okay. So, what's going on with brain growth at this point? The limbic system, which is in charge of fear and our emotions, matures before the area that can plan ahead and regulate our emotions. So, that kind of makes sense in terms of the teenage brain, where we typically act emotionally before thinking thoroughly. So, again, it's not completely developed. Our prefrontal cortex is developing all throughout adolescence and even into adulthood. Now, what about white matter and gray matter? So, white matter is increasing while gray matter is declining because synaptic pruning is continuing. And that's improving cognition. Myelination, which is coding of the white matter, is starts speeding up to help with comprehension. And teenage neurons are very sensitive, so they try to seek out those intense experiences, and it's again very driven by the brain. Here's a pictorial that shows you how gray matter matures over time, and you can again see the gray matter kind of decreasing as we get older. So this is from age 5 to age 20. Now, puberty, again, typically at around 8 or 9 years old, we start to have those hormonal changes. For girls, estrogen is released, and for boys, testosterone is released. Now, the growth spurt is a rapid gain in height and weight. And if you remember way back in where we talked about early childhood, children would gain about 2 to 2.5 inches a year and 5 to 7 pounds. Here you can see they gain a lot more than that in an extreme amount of time, which again is why puberty can be somewhat jarring for some teens. So here are again those hormonal influences on the body. It comes from the pituitary gland and then goes to our different areas. And you can see those characteristics. And I'll point these out here on our next slide. Okay, so the last slide was talking about, the norms for girls and boys. Well, the growth spurt typically happens for females first. They start at around age 10. Boys start at about 12 and a half. In terms of broadening in body shape, boys' shoulders broaden and girls' hips broaden, which again is prepping for childbirth. And then women gain more fat and men gain more muscle. Now, what are the consequences, as I mentioned earlier, about timing of puberty? Well, if you kind of think like an X here, that's how they're similar. So, early maturing boys are similar to late maturing girls, and late maturing boys are similar to early maturing girls. You can see that the early maturing boys and late maturing girls are more popular and confident and have a positive body image, while the other two are more unpopular, withdrawn, more deviant behavior, negative body image. So again, the timing of when you develop does play into your behaviors and your view of the self. Now, again, what are those individual differences and why do they happen? Well, hereditary information is passed to you from your parents, but nutrition can play into that also. They find that girls who excessively exercise, who are gymnasts, many times do not hit puberty and do not start menstruating at the same age as other girls. It's kind of stunted a bit. Again, they find differences in location, ethnic groups, socioeconomic status, and again, that secular trend, that change in generation to generation. We're seeing children reaching puberty at earlier ages compared to earlier um, generations. So, in terms of sexual maturation, there's primary sexual characteristics and there's secondary sexual characteristics. The primary is actually maturing your reproductive organs. So, when girls go through menarche, that is their first period. When boys go through spermarchy, that is the first production of sperm. So, that again shows that the body is getting ready for the reproductive process. The secondary sexual characteristics, again, start to give visible signs that you're going through puberty, like the growth of breasts, facial hair, voice changing, hair in other places. Again, those are those signs of puberty. Now, in terms of sexual activity in adolescence, we've actually seen a recent decline, but there is still a high percentage of sexually active teens. They find many males start earlier than females. Many typically have few partners at that age, but American youths, we find in research, are beginning at an earlier age, and they think that's maybe due to media. Now, why would a teen choose to be sexually active? Again, it typically is kind of that ecological systems approach, right? It's not just the child and their tendencies, but it's the family, their peers, their educational approach. So, again, we find when it's a child maybe who's developing early, they have parents who are not maybe monitoring them a lot, they have peers or siblings who are sexually active and maybe not really interested in school. Again, there's many factors in why a teen might be sexually active. So when we see our data here, we see from grade 9 to grade 12, we go from about 30% to almost 60% in both boys and girls. So again, showing us that typically by the time teens are reaching 17, 18 years old, over 50% have been sexually active. Well, when we talk about sexual activity, we have to also talk about sexually transmitted diseases or STDs. So you can look here at these are cases per 1,000 15 to 19-year-olds. So AIDS is very small in terms of the cases, but look at human papillomavirus or HPV, 15,000 teens per thousand thousand teens, there are 15,000 cases. So that again has become, um, more widespread in questioning, why is HPV so rampant? Well, we also developed a vaccine due to that. So I have a video clip that you guys can watch to get more information about that. But here is also the breakdown of whether it's a virus or bacteria. So, how do we prevent these STDs? Knowing your partner well, not using drugs or alcohol to where you wouldn't be thinking clearly, using protection. Um, and again, it's difficult with teens at this age. That's why, this area is sensitive because teens are still very emotionally driven and not always thinking clearly in terms of making plans. So sexual orientation, again, I think our book data is a little old, but only 4% of young people are identifying as non-heterosexual. Um, again, when someone chooses to come out to friends and family can be different depending on their experience. But again, there are a lot of stereotypes and misconceptions that still continue to be widespread. I do think we're moving in a good direction of being more open-minded, but again, there's still a lot of blame and there's still a lot of misunderstanding in terms of information. Now, pregnancy, if you look, almost a million teen girls are getting pregnant every year, and 25,000 are under the age of 15. So young, right? So almost 50% end up choosing abortion because, again, the responsibility of caring for a child when you're a child can be overwhelming and many times seem impossible. So, how do we help? Well, prevention versus intervention, right? Preventing something before it even happens and intervening because it's already occurring. So, to prevent, again, we need more effective sex education. Now, with access to information online, I think children are getting a lot of warped views of how to handle sexual situations, how to provide clear messages, what's comfortable for them. So, again, I think we need to work a lot on prevention, and then intervention is again helping these teens now, help them get health care and stay in school and make plans for the future and how are they going to parent and helping them with parenting skills and child care. So again, teen pregnancy is a lot for the teen, so they do need a lot of resources. And typically, a lot of the responsibility lands on the teen's parents and family members for that assistance. So let's look a little bit at gender and transgender. So being gender diverse can also be considered non-conforming, creative, or variant, where you still might prefer what's considered that gender, um, what would you say, the typical gender of clothing, accessory, hairstyles, activities. Um, but again, maybe you expect or you prefer things that are not expected based on your sex assigned at birth. So, gender is a construct, right? We're born female or male, but our gender is something that is developed over time. So again, a lot of people can feel comfortable being a girl who looks more genderly like a boy and are not interested in transitioning to that other gender. But some, again, do not feel comfortable in the body they were born in and may move towards different options. So transgender, I like how they word it here from our textbook. Typically, consistently, persistently, and insistently express a cross gender identity and feel that their gender is different from what they were assigned at birth. So, again, consistently, persistently, and insistently. It's not just something that's mentioned once or twice, it's something that is consuming these children's lives. And again, they're more likely to experience gender dysphoria, where they don't feel their physical appearance is matching what's inside. Again, some have expressed this from a very young age. Some don't realize it until they're older and go through that process of, transforming their gender. And some may make that decision to make it a change socially, legally, medically. Um, Many times changing their name. I think it's referred to as a dead name of their birth name. So, again, this process is emotional, it's life changing, it's trying to find acceptance from those around you and understanding, and can be a very difficult process. So I actually wanted to share a story I'm close to. Me and my family have known Nikki since she was a young child, and she was born male at birth. But again, before puberty even started to um, show that that was not her internal being, right? So I have some links here that you can get more information about Nikki and her journey. So, what about substance use? Again, adolescents kind of get a little bit more freedom and get around others who maybe have experimented, right? So, we have different patterns of experimenters and those who are using and it becomes abuse. Now, again, why? Maybe you feel antisocial, and when you smoke something or drink something, you feel more comfortable. Or environmentally, maybe you grew up in a family that was constantly having these substances around you where it kind of felt normal. Or where you witnessed their experiences and then stayed away from it, right? So you might be wondering, why do I have a jar of pickles here? Well, Do you know how a pickle becomes a pickle? Well, first it's a cucumber, and what we do is we dip that cucumber in vinegar, and the longer we leave it in there, the more it gets pickled. So my husband uses this analogy, right? Is yeah, you might just be experimenting at first, but the more you take that cucumber and dip it in the vinegar a little bit more, leave it in overnight, leave it in for a few days, consistently are dipping it, one day you pull that cucumber out and it's no longer a cucumber, it's a pickle. And again, that's kind of the analogy with addiction. One day you wake up and that addiction is present, and there's no way to kind of move back from it. It's now an ever persisting issue. So, again, just something to think about when we're approaching teens is yeah, it's not a big deal to do it every once in a while, but that every once in a while could turn into constantly dipping your cucumber and becoming a pickle. Okay, so here's substance use comparing the US to Europe. And again, this is older data. I'm interested to see how marijuana has changed since it's become legal in some states. But again, we're talking about 10th graders who should not be using substances because it is considered against the law. So you do see in Europe, again, alcohol, the age is younger, so children many times drink with family and, it's more social. But you can kind of see the breakdown here. Again, use is common in teens. So again, how do we prevent? How do we treat? Well, it takes a lot of effective parenting, monitoring, communicating, teaching skills for resisting when, you don't want to. And then also understanding that the health and safety risks, right? My husband would do presentations about drug use and stuff to young teens, and he would kind of show the physical toll it can have on a person. And he specifically would show one woman who just completely changed in a matter of years. And again, teens are very vain and they want a positive physical appearance. So that many times can kind of connect with them like, ooh, I do not want to look like that. And then sometimes you can get a commitment, maybe a contract or something, but again, it's really a comprehensive approach. It's not just the child. Now, nutrition, again, we see it very similar to middle childhood, where less fruits, vegetables, more soda, more fast food, less of the vitamins we need. And then even at this age, trying kind of fad diets or being vegetarians or vegans and kind of, again, working with who they are and experimenting. And many times that's also seen in food choices. Well, eating disorders also can occur, right? And there's anorexia and bulimia. Anorexia is starvation out of fear of getting fat. And again, looking at oneself in the mirror and seeing a very different picture than what everybody else sees. So it can be fatal. It's very, you know, harsh on a young teen's body, and only less than 50% actually recover because they believe it's very much about control, and it's actually something going on in the brain. It's not a physical ailment. Bulimia is a mixture. It is anorexia also, but then it's binging and purging. So consuming a lot of calories at one setting and then purging them in some way or another. Again, it can be life threatening, but for some reason they find bulimia is easier to treat. Now, sleep habits, again, 9 hours of sleep are needed, but I don't know many teens that are getting that sleep, especially during the week, maybe on the weekends. Again, our social habits, phone use, that's really played into when teens go to bed. And what we find is with sleep deprivation, teens can't achieve in the same way, right? They have mood problems and maybe get into higher risk behaviors. Now, again, these deprived teenagers many times use substances or to stay awake or to keep engaged. So in 2014 The American Academy of Pediatrics thought that high school should not begin until 8:30 or 9 because of sleep deprivation. Do you think that would help? Do you think teens would just keep going to bed even later and then waking up later? Again, it's an interesting concept, but it's also time is a construct, right? So we kind of have to adapt ourselves in terms of time. It's not always, the time that is making those decisions. All right, thank you guys for following along and email me with any questions.